She's a political commentator, co-founder of the Blexit Foundation, and author of the upcoming book, Blackout. Here to discuss the racial tensions currently simmering in the U.S. and how African Americans and other minority communities can claim a greater share of the American dream. Please welcome to the program, Candace Owens. Candace, thank you for being here. Now, we're hearing consistent cries of systemic racism, Candace, from politicians, from the media. On Tuesday, Attorney General William Barr testified before Congress, and this is what Representative Richmond from right here in Louisiana had to say. Watch.
You started your testimony with eloquent words about the life and legacy of John Lewis, fighting systematic racism, voter intimidation, civil rights. The one thing that you have in common with your two predecessors, both Attorney General Sessions and Attorney General Whitaker, is that when you all came here and brought your top staff, you brought no black people. That, sir, is systematic racism. That is exactly what John Lewis spent his life fighting. And so I would just suggest that actions speak louder than words, and you really should keep the name of the Honorable John Lewis out of the Department of Justice's mouth.
Candace, your reaction, and is there systemic or systematic, as the congressman said, racism in the United States?
I mean, it's so hard to listen to stuff like that because it's so obviously dishonest. I mean, what a bizarre thing to say that if you walk into a room and you don't walk in with a person of color, you're perpetuating some sort of systemic racism. Do the same rules apply if you walk into a room and you've got a white person, a black person, but you're lacking an Asian person? I mean, it makes no fundamental sense to say that depending on how many colored people are in the room determines whether or not the room is racist. And this is one of the things that people keep forgetting about America. We live in a majority white country, okay? So if you were in Uganda and you walked into a room and you saw majority black people, that would not be an example of systemic racism against white people. That would be an accurate reflection of the amount of white versus black people that live in the country. What black people are looking for right now, it seems, people like him who are race baiters, is to become a majority in every industry, in every room, on every sports team. And it doesn't work that way when you represent 13% of a population. This is such foolishness.
Candace, we keep hearing this systemic racism, though, that it exists, that it's in play. Do you believe it is? I mean, one could certainly say during the Jim Crow era, when African Americans couldn't vote, that's systemic racism. You have things in the system that are contributing to racism. Now that we've had a black president elected twice, black Supreme Court justices, is systemic racism still a reality today?
It is not a reality. It is the opposite of a reality. It's an illusion that people are holding on to because they don't want to do hard work and they just want to be afforded all of these privileges in life without ever having to work. There is absolutely nothing that I cannot do as a black American in this country that a white American can do. If you can point to me to the law or the practice that's in place that somehow keeps me out based on my character and how hard I work, if there's two people that are working the exact same and putting out the same, exerting the same amount of effort, and you're going to tell me that as a black person I can't get ahead, it doesn't exist. So what they're looking for right now, these race baiters and these race hustlers, is they want more. They want extra credit. Right? They want to be privileged. They want to be ahead of people. And that is what's wrong. That is where the real racism is existing. To say to someone, you need to constantly be with a black person. I mean, how foolish is that, Raymond?
I need to play something for you. This is a recent interview with that great interviewer, Seth Meyers. This is MSNBC host Joy Reid, and she was asked about the Black Lives Matter movement. Listen.
Black Lives Matter, it started, during enslavement, right? I mean, Black Lives Matter is an age-old movement that just changes names. It's been the civil rights movement. It's been run by SNCC. It's been run by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It's been John Lewis's movement. It's been Dr. King's movement.
Is the BLM a continuation of Dr. King's civil rights movement?
Yeah, I'm sure that Dr. King was a supporter of riot, of protesting, of burning down businesses, of killing and slaughtering Black Americans in the street. I'm sure that's really what he was a proponent of when he was standing up on stage, surrounded by white people, saying that we needed more peace. No, people in the civil rights era were actually fighting for something. They were actually fighting to put an end to racist practices. What they were really asking for was for the country to actually recognize the things that are promised and afforded to every human being under the Constitution of the United States. And we weren't getting that. We actually weren't recognizing the words of our own Constitution. And then we suddenly did. And what really happened during that period when blacks were finally granted true freedom in the forms of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is people went, oh my goodness, now I'm suddenly responsible for myself. Now I actually have to put in the work ethic. Now I can't complain or point to a systemic injustice. And then we started seeing this whole era of white guilt, right? Of saying that, well, no matter what any Black person does, they're guiltless and they're blameless. And we can point to 400 years of slavery to say that's the reason you got a bad grade on your test. What they're really creating is a system where Black Americans are never going to try and therefore never going to get ahead. And that is where the real racism exists. In telling somebody that they're less than repeatedly so they don't even try. And that racism is being executed by and large by the left, by white liberals, and by the Democrat Party.
In the same interview, Joy Reid was asked why we're seeing white people increasingly supporting Black Lives Matter. Listen to what she said.
It's not just a Black people concern. This is the public realizing if they're coming for Black lives, they're eventually coming for yours. They're eventually coming for your security and peace.
Candace, who are they? What narrative's being created here? And who does it serve?
No idea.
Ultimately?
I'm assuming they must be the police officers, because since Black Lives Matter right now, their main thing, the big piece of the puzzle is defund the police. The police officers are going to come for your life, which is just again extraordinarily dishonest. And it's incredible to me that these people are allowed to be on the air and allowed to keep spinning these lies. When police officers save lives, right? When the biggest threat to a Black person on the streets is another Black person, statistically speaking, and nobody wants to have that conversation because again, this is a narrative. This is not a truth. This is a narrative that is being spun during an election cycle to create division. And so she knows she's being dishonest. And it's incredible to me that she can continue to do that with a straight face, knowing that she is bringing about harm upon the very community that she claims to be speaking on behalf of.
There's a story, Candace, it's gotten almost no media coverage. A Black Milwaukee man, Burnell Trammell, who, by the way, was a supporter of Black Lives Matter, he was fatally shot last Thursday while sitting outside of his business. Now, he's often seen wielding large handwritten signs with his personal beliefs in big letters, okay? He supported George Floyd, police reform, and President Donald Trump. Now, it's suspected that his killing may have been politically motivated. Where's the outrage over the loss of this Black life? I've heard nothing of it. We don't know his name at all or hear it.
Over all of the Black lives that are being lost at the hands of other Black people and all of these shootings that are happening because now these cities are insecure because of these riots and these protests. It's not just him. David Dorn, the guy that we watched bleed out during the protests and riots when he was a police sergeant his whole life, 77 years old, retired, and gets shot and killed in cold blood because another Black person was robbing his store. Where is the outrage for these 1-year-olds and these 2-year-olds that are being killed, with stray bullets on the south side of Chicago, in Baltimore, in Trenton, New Jersey? We've seen tons of these stories that have happened since and because, as a direct result of the fact that criminals are being emboldened by the fact that there are calls to defund the police because they know that there's a vacuum of security where they can raise up and they can execute crimes and they'll be considered blameless and it won't be discussed. Where is the outrage in all of that? There is no outrage because this movement is not about Black lives. If it was about Black lives and preserving Black lives, we'd be having a conversation about Black on Black crime. They refuse to do that. They call that conversation racist. And that really lets you know that what we're seeing happen is Black people are being used as pawns to further a political progressive agenda.
What's the role of the Black church in all of this, Candace? I've been reading a great deal about, and it's largely white theologians, white writers bending over backwards to try to somehow accommodate Black Lives Matter, the movement, not the idea, but the movement, into their version of theology or the scriptures. Does the Black church and the church at large have a role in restoring true justice in these communities, in our inner cities and in our urban communities?
This is a really difficult question for me to answer, and it's a discussion that I have with my husband all the time. As a Christian,
Hmm.
you have to acknowledge that a lot of these progressive values and ideas that we've got into in this, these horrible progressive values and ideas were brought to the Black community via the church. Right, abortion. We know that during the progressive era, Margaret Sanger hatched a
Yep.
plan to go to the Black ministers because she understood, how close the Black community was to their faith. We are the
Right.
most faithful community in America in terms of church attendance, in terms of believing in God. Black America is the most faithful community. And unfortunately, the
Right.
left and progressives saw that as an opportunity to pass through bad ideas. I live in Washington, D.C. When I walk past churches and I see LGBT flags and I see Black Lives Matter, fists raised and on these churches, it scares me. It means that there right now we're also facing attack not just on the family unit, right, not just on racial harmony, but on the church. And that should be scary for everyone, because if you want to watch Western civilization crumble, you need to remember that Western civilization was built on Judeo-Christian beliefs, and so these routine attacks that we're seeing on people that are religious, right, on wanting people to shut down churches, saying that religion is dangerous, and now we're seeing progressive
Hmm.
ideals that have been passed through the church. This is a much larger plan to kill Western society. Western and the principles that govern Western society, that make the West the best, that make us different, and that have brought us to this place of greatness that we are in today. The role of the church should be to get back to the teaching of the Bible as it
Right.
is. Not an interpretation, not getting up with the times, not trying to be progressively woke, but teaching the actual content of the Bible. What we're seeing happen in the church should make every single person nervous.
Yeah, yeah, and reminding everyone that we're children of God. Forget the race, forget the background of people. We're children of God. If you start there, everything else will take care of itself. But we lose that. Somewhere along the way, that's forgotten, and we start playing these word games. Earlier this month, Candace, Kanye West, who I know you know, announced he was running for president. He had this to say about Planned Parenthood. He said Planned Parenthoods across the country have been placed inside cities by white supremacists to do the devil's work. Now, look, there are questions about whether Kanye is a serious candidate for president or not. But what do you make of him calling out Planned Parenthood? And as you mentioned earlier, this is the organization that tried to distance itself from Margaret Sanger in the wake of those comments and her racist eugenist vision. Does what Kanye say resonate with members of the African American community, do you think?
It certainly needs to, and this really gets back to just Black Americans needing to learn their true history. How many Black Americans do you think actually know that Margaret Sanger was an avowed racist and eugenicist, who was a supporter of the Mississippi appendectomies and wanting women that were Black and impoverished to make sure that they could never have children? She was the person who created Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood still, by and large, executes successfully on her dream. We know that 18 million plus Black babies aborted since 1973 should have everybody alarmed in discussing this. We know that the Black population growth has stagnated, and this is something at the same time. The irony that they're going around and looking at the history of every company and every brand, and Uncle Ben has got to go, and Aunt Jemima has to go, and the Land O'Lakes lady has got to go, but the Planned Parenthood building still get to stand. If you're looking into histories that are bad and you're pulling down statues, you're not going to pull down Planned Parenthood clinics. Margaret Sanger, her legacy gets to stand all over Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. These are questions that anybody should be asking. These are good questions to ask, and it should show you that they are here to further a narrative, and it is a narrative that, by and large, always hurts Black Americans. There is something about progressive policies that always lead to aggressive results in the Black community.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And this is, in some ways, this is arresting everybody's attention, one would hope, to the true tragedy and the true racism going on in these Black communities. And it's via the groups you just talked about. We are seeing statues coming down, monuments and streets renamed. This week, Loyola University of Maryland announced that a residence hall named in honor of Catholic writer Flannery O'Connor, the great Southern writer, would be renamed due to recent concerns about her use of racist language in private correspondence when she was a teenager in the 1940s. Now, what's most striking about this is the president of the university, Father Linan, said this about O'Connor's writings. He said, "I'm not a scholar of Flannery O'Connor, but I've studied her fiction and nonfiction writings. Particularly in her fiction, the dignity of African-American persons and their worth is consistently upheld, with the bigots being the object of ridicule." Does it make sense to cancel one of our greatest Southern authors? I mean, I guess Tennessee Williams, Capote, Twain are next here.
Well, they are. That's already happening. It's not next. It's already happening. On college campuses. John Locke. These are all of these people. All of these authors that I grew up reading in school are being canceled. They're not learning that stuff. They're being instead replaced with postmodern artists, postmodern writers and postmodern artists. And these are what the kids are studying. So you want to know why you have so many people that are supporting this? They're learning this actively in school. Of course, you shouldn't be canceled. Of course, every single person, especially when you go back to a time where slavery was all over the world, you're going to find people whose characters are conflicted, whose actions were conflicted. But does that take away from their work? Should we not study their work? Should we pretend history never happened? I mean, because that's what they're after. They want to pretend history never happened, that nothing good ever came during a time where there was bad. There's always going to be bad in the world. You can't pretend that every single thing that existed during bad periods somehow becomes moot and irrelevant and should be canceled. This is a dangerous way to be. And what we're talking about here really at its core are the tenets of Marxism and communism. Right? That everything is fundamentally wrong about society. Everything is backwards. The family, the church, the writers, history, everything needs to go. And because they're moving towards some false utopian society that's never going to exist. What's the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to wake up one day and you're not going to recognize the country that we live in. They're going to seize all of our rights. And I don't want to live in that society, which is why I encourage people to wake up now, because this fight and this threat that we're facing, this Marxist battle that we're in the midst of right now, is very, very real and has severe long-term implications.
Candace, you talked a moment ago about kids learning this critical theory in school. I mean, they're being spoon-fed. Oprah Winfrey signed a deal with Lionsgate and that New York Times journalist responsible for the 1619 Project. And this will examine the legacy of slavery via the lens of 1619 in television, in film. And this all began with an issue of the New York Times Magazine in 2019 to mark the 400th anniversary of slavery on the continent. Two questions. What do you make of the 1619 Project? And are we going to see a new African-American history here? Is that what this is?
It is. That's exactly what it is. They want to just pretend that none of the real stuff that actually happened happened. You're seeing this even. Forget the 1619 Project. Beyonce signed a deal with Disney, and she's coming out with a visual album called Black is King. Right, and she's got white servants serving her, and it's all about the Black story. I mean, what is that? What are we actually doing here? You're trying to, in a weird way, erase white America, pretend that the colonists never happened, that none of this stuff ever happened. And it's so fundamentally dishonest, because this stuff that they're so angry about, it happened everywhere in the world, right? You want to talk about slavery? Slavery happened everywhere in the world. And it wasn't an institution that was put together by white men. It was an institution that was put together by Black men, by Muslim men, by Black and brown people. This institution was put together. It was white men that were the first to end and abolish slavery. Britain, followed by France, followed by America, being the first countries that put an end to the abhorrent practice of slavery, right? You want to talk about people saying, go back to your African roots. Black is king. We were kings and queens in Africa. Such a fraudulent narrative, as we were sold into slavery by our ancestors for things as meaningless as gin and mirrors, right? People don't know this stuff. And what happens in Africa today? There still are slaves, Raymond. There still are slaves.
Yeah.
You want to actually get impassioned and angry about something? Go deal with the live slave auctions in Libya. Go deal with the fact that in Lake Volta, in Ghana, they have something like 20,000 child slaves working, doing fishing and things for people that are being rescued. This is a really a sign of our remarkable privilege and our insulation in America. These people don't know what happens outside. They don't understand how tremendously fortunate they are to be in the United States of America at this time. If you are a Black American and you are breathing in America today, you are a part of the most privileged, elite Black people and white people that have ever walked the face of the planet today. And that's the truth that they don't want to grapple with.
Candace Owens, thank you for your insight. I hope you'll come back. Candace Owens' new book, Blackout, hits stores September 15th.
Thank you so much for having me.